Let's go.
What's going on, guys? I just wanted to talk about one of my personal builds of a 2JZ swapped FRS. I've been having a lot of questions about how I did it and what it took place and how much money is spent and all that stuff. So I just wanted to give some details and what I had to do and how long it took me to build it and how long it took me to get into the stages. So hopefully I can explain best I can to you guys, and if anybody wants to do this swap, it'll be easy for you guys to find some information and be easy for you to see what you got to buy to get it done. So this car started as a FA20. First got in 2013, started driving around, started putting a little bit more power into it, and finally I put some turbo and made like 400 horsepower to it. And obviously it's a Subaru motor, so it didn't last long. Last down one, built another one, same story, didn't last too long. Built the third motor, final motor, and we did about 550 to the wheel, and then started having some oil pressure problems and head gasket problems, and finally I decided, hey, this is it, don't want to deal with this no more. And then it jumped into 2JZ. So when I was trying to do the swap back in 4 or 5 years ago, the 2JZs were pretty cheap. You could just import them from GDM Motorsports in California. Bought the motor in a crate for $1,700. Spent another $3,000 on the transmission with a little bit of first, when I was trying to do the swap, obviously there wasn't a lot of information about it, and there weren't a lot of people doing this swap, and so not a lot of people were comfortable with doing it. So I just took the matters to my own hands and then said, hey, whatever it is, it's gonna happen. It's a learning stage, so you gotta do what you gotta do to learn and build your own stuff. So that's when I started doing the swap to see what it actually takes to do it. So I just wanted to buy something that's already been made by CX Racing to see if I can buy their product and just redesign it and make it the way I wanted to make it. So the way I wanted to build this thing is to have all the OEM factors and everything to be working, so that I have to deal with none of those different gauges and different stuff, different dashboards, whatever needs to be done that a lot of people do to just get it running. So I did buy the CX Racing engine mount and transmission mount stuff, and got them over here. I installed them. They didn't like the way they looked. Couldn't close my hood. Didn't do the way I wanted to look. So I took it apart, and then I completely made my custom engine mount so I can lower the motor as far as I can and bring it as far back as I can, just enough so I can still was able to put my heater hoses back on, and to be able to run my AC and everything. Was actually, I had to draw all that design and the spaces and the way the motor needs to be sitting, how much tilt it needs, and how much forward tilts it needs, and so I can close the hood and get everything settled the way I wanted to. So yes, the progress was pretty long. It took me about 2 years to get the motor in and get the transmission seated where I wanted it, and so that way I didn't have to modify my tunnel, so I can have the transmission shift just sitting exactly where the OEM shifters used to sit in FRSs and BRZs. So I got all that settled out, and then the next question was how I'm gonna mount the turbo, where I can get the exhaust down, trying to keep the heat away from the engine bay, trying to keep it cool. The intake manifold, this is all custom built as well. So let me check you guys some of the specs that I actually have in this car. So this right here, that's a GM throttle body. It's a 90mm from my LS4. That's what I'm running. And actually the ECU is the Motec M130 that Pearl Automotive built it specifically for this application, because I told them what I wanted it and they built it for me. And yes, Motec, it is expensive, but if you have a goal of something that you don't have to worry about never, that you can just turn the key, drive, and don't worry about nothing, and you still have your OEM functions and everything that a lot of people don't want to miss out and not to have, technically it's kind of annoying. So you would want to spend it. And yes, of course, you can go through different ECUs and stuff like that and make it happen, which is completely okay. But in my application, that's what I want to do, so I don't have to worry about none of that stuff. So the turbo is a 62, 66 precision, and I have 3-inch all the way down to 800 horsepower intercooler going to the front and coming down. So if anybody wants to do the swap, so the 2JZs are pretty long motors, so you're gonna have to, the motor's gonna have to be sitting way to the front end of the car. And because the engine bay is so crowded with the 2JZ, with everything else, it doesn't have enough coolant. So which means you're gonna run into some cooling issues. And I did have some issues. And let me explain how I get rid of it. So first of all, you're gonna have to get the intercooler and the radiator moved forward. People that know actually the FRSs and 2JZ, FRSs with 2JZs, you'll see that the normal FRS radiator actually sits more tilted to the front end, so it's never straight. For you to be able to have that space and put some nice and bigger fans like I do have here, I have two 12-inch SPAL fans, which does the job perfectly. And I did that, and also it was cooling just enough, but it wasn't the way I wanted it. So what I did, I actually went and bought engine ice, which is a racing coolant. And yes, a lot of people will say, hey, engine coolant, that's just gonna be like the fans will kick in and they'll turn off real quickly and it'll be annoying. That's not the case. It's because this engine actually runs way too hot in this engine bay because it doesn't have a lot of space. This engine ice coolant actually works beautifully. So any lower temperatures, like anything below 80 degrees, you're driving down the road, your fans won't even kick in at all. Trust me, they never kick in. Summertime, they do kick in. They'll just cool it off real quick. And when you're driving down the freeway, they'll be like, just turned on slowly, perfectly, doesn't drag any more power that you need. You step at the stoplight or anything like that, just turns on for like 5-10 minutes, shuts off, perfect, good to go. So it technically works like a normal car is supposed to do. So I'm really happy that I went with it. So let's continue with this. So as you guys can see, I still didn't remove my battery from here because I want it to be accessible. And I don't like that trunk battery things and stuff like that. It's, if you ever get rear-ended, the battery gets smashed, and that's the first case of having fires, and I don't want that. So if you come down here, and the way I had to do my engine mounts is, so I can, if you guys can see it, let me do that. That's a heater hose that goes to the OEM FRS body. And that hose right there specifically got from VR6 Volkswagen, to be honest. Yeah, you know, I don't like Volkswagens, but it is what it is. You get, in this kind of case, you're gonna have to smash from any cars and any parts that you possibly can to get your job done. And wastegate, it's a 44 millimeter precision as well. I love that thing. It's been working for me perfectly for 4 years. Custom built headers. They also need to be a little bit closer to the motor, so that way you can actually put a bigger turbo. And the futures, this is gonna get a 75, 78 turbo, so I can go up to that goal that I have, 1200, but that comes in the future. So cam gears, Eagle Eye Racing, they're billet, really nice, adjustable, the way you can get your timing perfectly set up. Coils, it's IGN 1As, love them. one of the best coils you can ever do to any of your swaps. One of the best upgrades you can ever do. Never have to worry about any gap year or spark plugs or any of that stuff. It's just beautiful. So fuel rail, it's I'm actually sitting on an ID 1000 injectors. And on a 2JZ, you do actually have to do, like if you're doing a swap like this, you do actually have to customize that fuel rail. And this is why. So if you look through the back where the clutch master cylinder sits, it's actually really close. And most of the time people won't care about this, but I do. And that thing will be actually rubbing against the clutch master, and usually if you do have your stuck AC lines and stuff like that, this will actually be in your way. So you do have to shorten that out just a little bit. If you guys look closely, get you guys over there, that's already been shortened, so that way I can bring that closer to this way. And the way I ran my return, so the fit line comes through here, the 8AN comes through, and then it goes back in through the middle. So which means I'm having the full relay of fuel pressure and comes back down to fuel pressure regulator and goes back into all the way up to the cooler, which I do have a cooler, and I will explain in a second why you need a fuel cooler in this case, and goes back into the tank. So the reason you want a fuel cooler, especially in an application like this that you have a lot of power, you have a crowded engine bay and stuff like this, is because the fuel actually gets hot. It gets really hot and you can actually vapor lock your car. And in my case, I did run into some kind of issues when the fuel was boiling inside the rail, and I had to actually stop and cool the car down or go get some fresh fuel so it can cool off the system. And so finally talked to a couple of people to see what I can do and what will be the best choice, either ice or just throw a cooler. I just didn't know how efficient the cooler would be. So, and I said, all right, I'll just try it out and see how cool it will keep the fuel and how good it's going to be, and then I'll just go from there. So I did put a cooler. It's a 19-row cooler. If I can bring you guys down here, you should be able to see it right there. And I still didn't trust it, so I did bought a fan for it, and I made like a shroud kind of thing with aluminum. It's pretty easy. Anybody can make it, to be honest. Made a shroud, and that thing made a huge difference. So no matter how many races I do, what I do, how long I do the pulls, the fuel always stays steady, which is good for your power levels and for tuning applications, because when the fuel gets hot, you know, you go lean, and you don't want that, because you lean, you go kaboom, that nobody wants. And same thing in here. So the oil cooler comes to this side. They're all AN10s. So both sides, they do have coolers to cool it off. And the trickiest part on this build was to put the AC back on. So if you guys want to do the AC, I'm actually running, that's right there is a stock FA20 AC compressor. Okay, yes, you can run a 2JZ AC compressor, but your spacing is gonna be completely off, so you can't really use OEM lines for AC on an FRS. So that's why I wanted to go with this route. Plus the 2JZ compressor is huge, and I'm not really a fan of those either. So this one kind of a compact system, so it's kind of smaller, and I could still use most of my OEM FRS hoses, which is really nice because all the sensors and all the pressure sensors and everything just hooks up right away, and you don't have to worry about it. On this one, you do have to do, you know, a little bit of bending on the aluminum piping and stuff like that, which is not a big deal. You just have to be careful so you don't crack it and stuff like that, so you don't lose pressure. But this is why I choose Motec, because Motec can actually control most of your AC and everything else. And it's actually pretty easy to run the AC on these cars. So if you do have a Motec, obviously, most of the ECUs can do, but FRS and BRZ, they actually run CAN bus, and CAN bus is kind of tricky to control. So that's why a lot of ECUs cannot control CAN bus in most of the cars. So the AC, so in your OEM harness, there's a black and purple wire that you actually have to separate, because that comes to the fuse box and then it's controlled by the CAN bus that you have inside your AC controllers and everything else. So all you have to do is get that purple wire connected to your AC compressor, and then all you have to do is tell your Motec to, hey, look, I want the AC buttons on, and I want it to kick in. And it's just simply as saying that, hey, I have a compressor on, boom, it shut. Turns on all your fans and everything else, and you're good to go. So you don't have to worry about chasing some wires, putting your relays on, and everything else like that. But you do have to make sure your pressure sensor is actually hooked up, because if that's not hooked up, the ECU has nothing up. It doesn't know anything about itself. Like, it doesn't know how much pressure you got, any of that stuff. So in most of these 2JZ swaps or LS swaps in this case, if you're not really educated or you have knowledge of building this stuff, you will actually cut a lot of stuff that it's not necessary to do so. And then you're going to regret yourself, because it's going to be loud, noisy. The dust and dirt and noises will come through those holes that you cut, to be honest, and it's going to look ridiculous. So that's why I'm trying to explain and show you guys that's not necessary. You don't have to do it. All you have to do is to make the swap clean, and how much you have to spend. So the engine actually sits, if you guys do go with CX Racing engine mounts, and yes, actually nowadays you can actually go and buy 2JZ FRS swap kits that it's not CX Racing anymore, and you can actually get some quality parts. And most of those parts and engine mounts won't actually sit the engine down far enough. The reason why, if you ever want to run an IGN-1A coils on the top of the motor, just like I do have right here, your hood would never close. So this hood would never close. Even though I do have a carbon fiber hood, if you do have an OEM hood, it will never work with yours, because you have the ribs and everything else that you have to cut off. And then because it's being an aluminum hood, it will be all floppy, that I don't like. So carbon fiber hood is the way to go. And it's all money, obviously, but this hole right here I had to do because this motor was a VVTi. And if you guys know 2JZs, they do have a VVTi solenoid that sits right here. And that was the only modification that I had to do when it was a VVTi. To be honest, I don't like the look of a VVTi. Yes, VVTi do give you good amount of power and really nice torque and bottom ends and spooling your turbo really nicely. But I just wanted to have this sleek, like GDM kind of look from a 2JZ that I always want and liked. Plus, I'm running a 272 cams BC fully built head, and all of this is done in-house by me in the garage, ported and polished. All the valves been upgraded into beehive springs with titanium retainers and 1mm oversized titanium valves all the way around, and poured and polished. So depending on the power level that you guys are looking for, you don't really need to port or polish your head. The reason I want to do is because it kind of helps the tuner or whoever tunes your car to get all the base fueling and everything correctly, is because you don't have no more of that. Let's say you're spraying like 5% of fuel, right? Only 3% of that fuel will make down to the train, because all that rough edges and everything will clean and get stuck in that in ports and everything. So when you port and polish it, that actually becomes smooth. So now all that fuel that's sprayed, it has nowhere to stop or drag or anything. So it just enters the chamber much faster. And because intakes and heads will be so hot that usually most of that fuel gets evaporated, and you will hear some unnecessary combustion that you don't want, because that's the way to damage your vehicle. So when you do go high powers and everything, a lot of people do port and polish, at least port it, so that way it's a little bit easier, or more fuel and more air. As you guys know, more air, more fuel, bigger bank, more power. So that's what I had to do. So the valve covers, I got AN10 fittings and dash 10s on both sides. So I welded them into the valve covers. On 2 JZs on a stock valve covers, and on the driver's side, this valve cover has a really small breather, but this side is not as bad. So this side you can actually throw an AN10 burp in it and you can weld it all the way around. But this one right here, you're gonna have to drill it out. And when you guys do drill it out, you're gonna have to get the baffle from the other side off and clean all that shavings off, because it's gonna end up in your motor and you don't want that. Trust me. If you're spending so much money and time, you don't want something small like that to screw with your stuff. And continue with the IGN 1As. I'm a really big fan of HKS, so I did throw some HKS plugs in here, just for the fun of it, and they do actually work pretty nicely. So I don't have to worry about none of that. Hey, is my spark plugs bad or whatever? So none of that stuff. So the way I'm telling you to build your engine mounts and stuff like that, this is the reason, because I can actually, I don't know if I can show you guys close enough, but I can actually I still have my OEM, like the FRS BRZ OEM bash plate underneath this car. So this engine sits so perfectly. It's not like tilted too much to the side, front to the back or whatever, that actually I can afford to put that back on. Is because I don't want anything fly out and at that speed and hit some, like the oil pan and stuff, and destroy it, and you don't want none of that stuff. So when I close my hood, like nobody would know what kind of motor I got in here, and they'll be like, oh, okay, it's just a turbo F820, I guess. And this is why I built it, because I wanted to build the ultimate, like a race daily kind of driver car. And a lot of people don't want to do it. They just want to build a race car, which is perfectly fine. But having a 2JZ swapped FRS, driving around with nobody knows what you got, with everything working with AC, trust me, it's one of the pleasures you can ever get. And I love it. I mean, I can't tell anything more about it. It's so much fun, because I was a fan of Supras and I couldn't own one because they kind of jumped on price like crazy. So I just wanted to combine both rolls together. I love the body of the FRSs. I was always thinking they had a weak motor, so I just wanted to do the swap. So the exhaust is actually, I welded the exhaust by myself at home to get the bends that you need to clear the transmission so it's not too low to the ground, and all of that stuff that you need to do so you don't drag your exhaust, or it's like restricted flow and stuff like that. You don't want none of that stuff. So yeah, it's built in-house. Spent about 2-3 hours getting the shape and everything and welding it together and all of that stuff to get it done. And I'm also still using a TRD muffler that I bought for $1,600. The Toyotas, FRSs used to come back in the day. And they're really, really nice mufflers. They're actually straight flows. They're 5-inch both sides. And they have zero restriction, but they also keep the car nice and quiet so you can go through drive-thrus and not annoy anybody, to be honest, or your neighbors. But it also has zero restriction, like zero. It's already been tested. Boost controller, I just wanted to put it right there so it's easy to access, and it's technically clean, pretty much. So when it comes to running your intake pipes, this is the way you have to do it. So if you go from the top, this right here, if you want to do the same application that I did, you actually have to modify your headlights. So the headlights on FRS and BRZ, they do have these little bulges on the sides that you just have to cut them up just a little bit, and you can throw like a silicone tape on there so it seals the whole system. And I had that for past 4 or 5 years now that I had the motor, and they never fogged out. Never. I never had that issue. Same thing on this side. If you do run this kind of intake manifold, I'm pretty sure they do have a lot of designs that look similar that you can buy. And if you run the same size throttle body and the same size intake, manifold and a 3-inch piping, you actually do have to modify just a little bit of frame right there so you can get that angle. Yes, in the future I want to cut that up and make the more 90, I'll say 45 angle, so that way it goes more towards the headlight. But if you guys look carefully, see where I had to cut the headlight? So that's why it's cleaning, because I'm going to run a 4-inch pipe coming all the way up. So that's why I wanted to do everything ahead, so that way I don't have to worry about it later. So you do have to remove that the airbag. Well, I say airbag sensor, the collision sensor, whatever. You can just toss it right there. You can toss it anywhere you want, as long as it's not in a rattly place and it hits the sensor, because you might ignite the airbags that you don't want when you're driving. The ABS is still in the same place. Never touched that. Flex view sensor just sitting right there, and it goes through that before it goes through the cooler. So that way you raise, you can see what temperature actually fuel is and everything else. Fuel pressure regulator, it's a full-blown motorsports fuel pressure regulator, including AEM fuel pressure sensor. So something I gotta tell you guys about these sensors. So if you're in a cheap budget, you don't want to spend a lot of money, you can buy the gold ones, the bronze ones. They're about $60, and those do not go for too long, and they eventually go. They usually last you, depending how rough it is and how vibrated it is and where they're sitting. I had to replace like 4 of them, and every time they used to go, the first few times you have no idea. You think you have some wiring issues or what's going on, your tune is all off, your car is weird, and it's literally because that sensor just went off. Because ECUs, they're technically like your veins. They like to read and see what you're doing, so you can tell your brain or your ECU, hey, what shape you are, you're good to go, whatever the deal is. So these sensors right here, the silver ones, these are designed to withstand vibrations, high heat, and all kinds of stuff. And they are pricey. They're $170 per pair. But trust me, this is worth it. So that way you throw it in and you have to forget about it. So everything's accurate and reads perfect, and ECU can actually be more free, and you can be more reliable on driving those up. And I did replace every single sensor I got with those guys. And you don't want to learn that one in the hard way. So that's why I want to explain to you guys and show you what will be the easiest step for you guys to do, so you guys don't have to spend a lot of money. Yes, when I was building this thing, I was thinking the same way, going cheaper and then I can upgrade it down the road. But trust me, you actually spend more money doing it that way than actually waiting and buying the right product and the right part right at the bat. So that way you can actually have your horsepower goals and everything else, and you know the part that you bought will withstand and it will handle you for at least a couple of years. Well, obviously depending on your use, but at least a couple of years, so you can actually enjoy and drive it, rather than having something blowing up and something's not working correctly and your tuner says, hey, your shit is garbage. So you don't want that. So when it comes to the transmission, it's an R154 that I rebuilt it from Drift Motions. They do have a new bearing set and new synchro set and everything else, and upgraded thrust washers with the forks, billet forks. So I rebuilt it because the OEM one was making some noises and I didn't like, so I rebuilt that one. And with the rebuild kit, they said it should be good for 900 horsepower, which I've been pushing limit of my clutch, which is I have a Drift Motion super single clutch, which I love that clutch. It's perfect. The drivability and the clutch feeling is like OEM, and it's rated for 750 horsepower to the wheels, which is really, really nice, especially if you do it on a FRS swap, because this car is about 1,000 pounds lighter than a Supra or a SC300 and IS300s, whatever the deal is. Your clutch and your transmission will be a lot lighter. It'll be easier on your transmission and clutch because it has less weight to move around. So I've been driving with it for about 2 years now. with this new clutch that I swapped in, and I never had issues, never slipped, never burned, never hated it to drive daily. It's always beautiful to drive, so you don't have that leg cramp that most of the guys will have from high clutches. So that's what my transmission is, and I had to do custom transmission mount so I can have the draft shaft angle just perfect, so you don't have no vibrations and stuff like that. And that's a thing, guys. When you do swap your draft shaft for a lighter draft shaft or whatever you want to do, just make sure you do get that angles correct, because if you don't have the pinion angle and then the transmission angle correctly, your vibration will actually damage most of your transmission bearings, including your draft shaft, including your differential. All of that will get damaged, because at certain speeds the vibration gets so rush and so harsh that it's actually will start eating through your seals on your transmission, and you will have all that weird vibration that you don't need. And most of these transmissions do have a bushing on the tail shaft that usually dies quicker. So you're trying to stay away from that. Just make sure, if you don't know how to set the pinion angle and stuff like that, just take it to the shop, have them look at it, have them set the angles correctly, so you don't hate your life later. Trust me, it's a thing. I learned the hard way, but it won't happen. So when it comes to the outside of the car, I kind of like the exterior to look nice with the power. I just want the exterior fast look to have same amount of power underneath the hood. So that's what I went. So this is what you gotta do. If you do upgrade like this, if you wanted to a heavier motor from the previous motor that you had, the new motor will be way too heavy on the nose. So we're talking about almost 300 pounds to 400 pounds heavier in the nose with all the upgrades you got. Plus you got the turbo exhaust and intercooler and all that stuff. Your stock brakes will be okay in slow driving and stuff like that, but if you're going to hit the brakes twice hard, they don't stop you. Trust me, they do not stop you. So the best upgrade you got for FRS and BRZs, they got this perfect Wilwood brake kit that I have, 6 pistons in the front. Really nice. You shave about 6 to 10 pounds from the front end just from the brake kit, and they do work beautifully. I just love them. They just stop you perfectly, and they never overheat, and you can take it to the track and you can blast it all day long, and they're perfect. So, and these wheels right here, these are AV ones. They're custom made ones. These ones, they custom made them just for me, is because I don't like wide body kits. Is because when you cut your stock body, there's no coming back from it. You're gonna have to change the whole panel and everything, and I didn't like that. So I just wanted to keep it as slick as possible and widest wheels and widest tires I can put on this car. So the ones in the front, they're custom made. They're specifically 50 millimeters bigger than a 9.5 for the fronts. So that way, so technically it's, if you look at from here, that's how much they're sticking out, which is just perfect. Like if you go straight from the top, I got about a 1/2 inch or 1/4 inch sticking out, which is when the suspension compresses, that goes all the way in and you have no rub. And I never lowered my car because I went from 17 to a 19-inch wheels with the 35 in the front and 255s. So it's a 255, 35, 19s, R888s, and one of the best tires you can buy. The rears are a little bit different as well. So they are 275, 35, 19s by 10.75 width. So they made them just perfectly so I can actually have, so technically it makes your car look a little bit wider than it is. So I have exact 1/4 inch or 1/2 inch in the back and in the front. So it looks square, it looks nice. So that's why I don't have no rubbing or anything else. And you don't really have, it's not, in my opinion, I don't think that's a really big of a gap, to be honest. Because when you do lower your cars, you can't really go through most of the parking lots and stuff like that. And it looks stupid when you get stuck. When your car looks so nice and you just get stuck, it's kind of embarrassing. Never had that issue. So when it comes to your differential on FRS, these differentials are actually exactly the same as IS300, which is they're pretty strong and they have torsion differential. So they're really nice locking differential, so you don't have to deal with none of that clutches going out and stuff like that. So this differential that I have now, it's actually a stuck differential that I only had to rebuild the bearings once in his whole life. It's a 9-year-old car, and trust me, I throw a lot of abuse on this thing, and this thing just takes it. I still don't have any noises or anything like that. And I've been on 700 horsepower easily for past 4 years and never had any issues. So those differentials are not necessary to replace unless you're doing like a drag race and you doing pulls from a dig and everything like that. Anything like that will burn and break your stuff no matter what kind of part you got or how expensive it is. It's just a fact. So as long as you be careful with it, as long as you know what you're doing, they actually last really long, and I like it, and they're really nice. So this is my first video I just wanted to do. I have many more coming. We do have a bunch of different cars that were built for my buddies and friends and everything like that. I would like to share with you guys what we do, the way we do it, that a lot of people actually keep it secret, that they don't want to share, that I do want to share with people that like cars and they want to do the same swap or any swaps, to be honest. That you just have to take the challenge, never be afraid, just take a challenge and just start doing it. If you do mess up or you get stuck somewhere, you're more than welcome to reach out and leave me a comment, and I can try to come back to you guys as fast as I can and help you out as much as I can to do. And it's always nice to have a friend that actually knows a little bit of cars, so that way he can help you out when you get stuck. So yeah, there it is, guys. I mean, I had this car for 9 years now, and I just wanted to share what I have, and hopefully you guys like it, and subscribe to me, please, and leave a thumbs up, and let me know if you guys want to know any more information that I'm more than welcome to explain. Thank you, and have a good day.